Welcome to Oopsie Archives, the place where history's greatest empires, generals, kings, and conquerors all have one thing in common. They screwed up big time. From wars started by pigs and pastries to emperors who self-destructed their own dynasties, we dive into the hilarious, horrifying, and downright head-scratching mistakes that changed the world. So buckle up. The past is full of bloopers. This is the Oopsie Archive. Have you ever made a dumb decision? Come on, be honest. Well, if you have, don't worry. You can be forgiven. After all, we all make mistakes. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, one of history's greatest military commanders. Yeah, he also has a few choice oopsies under his belt. In fact, today we talk about the time he ate snow, because he was too proud to admit he didn't know how to tie his boots. Yep, this happened, and it was during one of his most disastrous campaigns ever. So get ready for our latest installment in the Oopsie Archive, where history's greatest empires, generals, kings, and conquerors are brought down by the most ridiculous mistakes in human history. And if you like stories like these, then hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. It really helps us out. Thanks. Now let's jump into the archive. Napoleon's invasion of Russia is considered a major turning point in history. And although Napoleon had many great victories during his wars, his Russian campaign is pretty much remembered as one giant series of defeats. There is actually some debate about whether or not it was even a real botched invasion, or if Napoleon was simply trying to scare Russia into submission. But either way, the campaign was a total disaster. It started in June of 1812 when Napoleon, leading the Grand Armée, crossed the Niemen River into Russia, with the goal of ending the ongoing conflict between France and Russia once and for all. Now, we're not going to go over every single battle, because that would take hours. Instead, we're just going to focus on the little guy who accidentally shot Lincoln's assassin. Okay, so the French and Russians were at war for 2 years before Napoleon decided to invade, and there were constant clashes between the two armies. But 2 years of fighting had weakened either army enough to make the outcome of a confrontation certain. Also, both sides were exhausted and longed for peace, but neither side could achieve victory, which meant things were kind of at a stalemate. That was until Napoleon got fed up and decided to go for broke. In late June, Napoleon crossed the Niemen River into Russia with his 600,000 troops, immediately beginning his invasion. Just a few days later, the French routed the Russians at the Battle of the Klyazma River, forcing them to retreat deeper into Mother Russia. And here's where things start getting a bit weird. See, Napoleon's ego was bigger than most countries, and he believed himself to be invincible. He also thought Russia wouldn't be able to mount any sort of effective resistance, and he had hoped to end the war in just a few weeks. But after defeating the Russians at the Klyazma, Napoleon realized he had a huge problem. The Russian forces were retreating, but that wasn't a good thing. You see, Russia is insanely large. We're talking the largest country in the world right now. If you want to try and invade it, you need to act quickly. But Napoleon wasted almost a month slowly pursuing the Russian forces instead of launching a quick strike and chasing them down. To make matters worse, the Russian scorched-earth policy damaged the French supply lines, forcing Napoleon to stretch his food reserves even thinner than they already were. By mid-August, his army had swelled to around 700,000 men, but they were starving. But Napoleon was still in denial. In early September, he defeated the Russians again at the Battle of Borodino, inflicting heavy casualties. But instead of chasing the fleeing Russians, he gave them 3 days to collect themselves and prepare to meet his army. Again, he should have chased them down while they were weak, but he was just too cocky. This allowed the Russians to regroup and strengthen their defenses around Moscow. As winter approached, Napoleon knew he needed to capture the city. If he couldn't do that, he would be forced to retreat into the brutal Russian winter with a hungry army, and he knew that would decimate his force. As it turns out, the Russians had prepared well, though the French struggled to make any headway. So Napoleon ordered his troops to launch a final assault on the night of October. But the attack failed and left another 20,000 men dead. At that point, Napoleon knew he had lost. Moscow was impossible to take. Winter was coming, and his men were starving. So he retreated from Moscow, hoping to find some food in the countryside. But he found none. Throughout the whole of October, the French were harassed by Russian cavalry, forcing them to abandon most of their equipment and supplies. When Napoleon finally reached Smolensk in early November, only 100,000 of his 700,000 troops were still with him, and they were half-starved. So he retreated back into Poland, knowing the war was lost, but within weeks, his entire army was shattered by cold, hunger, and disease. But let's get back to that snowy face plant. During the retreat from Moscow, Napoleon was on the move constantly, rarely stopping in one place for more than a day. He slept outdoors in a small tent and worked long hours, eating little more than bread and meat. But he wasn't doing any hard labor, and spent much of his time riding a horse. Still, he got pretty skinny during the retreat, and during the winter campaign, Napoleon got sick and spent several days in a feverish sleep, losing even more weight. When he recovered, he began to eat more, including snow. That's right, he was so desperate to fill his empty stomach that he ate snow. Of course, that didn't help his condition at all, and actually made things worse. But there's a rumor that spread about why Napoleon was eating snow, and it's definitely funnier. According to a story that started circulating around the same time as Napoleon's invasion of Russia, the French emperor was having trouble tying his boots. Now, most people probably think this sounds ridiculously stupid. After all, how hard is it to tie your boots? Well, apparently very hard for Napoleon, because rather than ask anyone for help, he came up with what he thought was a brilliant solution. He simply began eating snow, saying that he was tired of the taste of bread and wanted something different. He claimed that eating snow helped keep his boots tied, but we're pretty sure that was just a lie to save face. After all, there's no way someone as prideful as Napoleon would admit he couldn't tie his own boots, and the timing of the story also makes it seem dubious. Why would someone be eating snow in the middle of winter unless they were trying to cool off? Unfortunately for Napoleon, the story stuck and became a part of popular culture, even inspiring a painting by Dutch Golden Age painter Johannes. And unfortunately for Napoleon, his problems were far from over. After retreating to Poland, he was forced to watch as his Grand Army, which had been 700,000 strong, was whittled down to a mere 40,000 men in just a few months. When he returned to Paris in April of 1813, he had no supporters left and was forced to escape to the island of Elba, off the coast of Italy. There he stayed for a year before escaping back to France and launching a last-ditch attempt to regain the throne. But that ended with his final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. At that point, Napoleon had no army left. His siblings and former allies were fighting against him and most of Europe hated him, so he surrendered and was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean. There he spent his remaining days writing his memoirs, until he died of stomach cancer on May 5th, 1821, and that is the sad end of one of history's greatest military minds. We hope you enjoyed learning about Napoleon's snowy faceplant, and how it might have been caused by his inability to tie his boots. We certainly enjoyed making the video for you, but now we need you to make a decision. What should we cover next in the UPC archive? Please let us know in the comments below. Also, if you want to see more videos like this, then hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time when we bring you more stories of the UPC archive.